Why would you do if a billionaire invited your child to play chess just for entertainment, never imagining they were about to face a mastermind? When 13-year-old Marcus Williams walked into Victoria Sterling's mansion with his mother, the maid, he never expected to hear those words. "Why don't you play a little game with me?" Victoria Sterling, tech-millionaire worth over $2 billion, thought she was about to have some amusing fun with the help's quiet son. She had no idea she was challenging one of the most brilliant young chess minds in the country. What happened next would shatter every assumption she had about talent, intelligence, and the people she'd overlooked her entire life. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now. Subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marcus Williams pressed his face against the cool window of his mother's old Honda Civic as they pulled through the iron gates of the Sterling estate. At 13, he had learned to make himself invisible in places like this. "Remember what I told you, baby," Sarah said softly, glancing at her son through the rearview mirror. "Stay quiet, stay out of the way, and don't touch anything. Mrs. Sterling is having some important people over today." Marcus nodded, clutching his worn backpack containing a few library books and his composition notebook. He'd rather be at the community center playing chess, but his mother needed to work this Saturday and she couldn't afford a babysitter. At least the Sterling mansion had interesting things to look at, unlike the cramped apartment they called home. Victoria Sterling stood at her office window, watching the housekeeper's car pull into the service entrance. At 50, she commanded respect in boardrooms across Silicon Valley, her platinum blonde hair always perfectly styled, her designer suits impeccable. She barely noticed the small figure who climbed out of the passenger seat, just another child of the help, invisible like furniture. "Sarah's here with her boy again," Victoria murmured to herself, turning back to her computer screen. She had calls to make, deals to close, empires to expand. The domestic staff and their families were background noise in her carefully orchestrated life. Marcus followed his mother through the service entrance, his sneakers silent on the marble floors. While Sarah bustled around preparing for the evening's dinner party, Marcus found himself drawn to Victoria's study. Through the open doorway he could see floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, expensive artwork, and there, on a side table, the most beautiful chess set he'd ever seen. The pieces looked like they were carved from ivory and ebony, each one a work of art. Fascinating, isn't it? Victoria's voice made Marcus jump. She stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, studying him with curious eyes. "That set belonged to my father. Cost more than most people make in a year." Marcus stepped back quickly, his hand behind his back. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I wasn't going to touch anything." "Of course you weren't." Victoria's tone carried the casual dismissiveness of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Do you even know what that is?" "It's a chess set," Marcus replied quietly. "The pieces are Staunton design, probably late 19th century based on the carving style." Victoria raised an eyebrow, momentarily surprised by the boy's knowledge, but quickly dismissed it. Children today had access to the internet. Anyone could memorize random facts. "Well, it's not a toy. It's a serious game for serious people." Marcus wanted to tell her that he knew exactly how serious chess could be, that he'd been playing since he was 7, that he spent every free moment at the community center challenging adults and winning. But he'd learned long ago that people like Victoria Sterling weren't interested in hearing about the hidden talents of people like him. So he simply nodded and said, "Yes, ma'am." As Victoria walked away, Marcus took one last look at the chess set. The white king seemed to stare back at him, as if issuing a silent challenge. Someday, Marcus thought, someday he'd get the chance to show people like Victoria Sterling that intelligence and talent weren't reserved for those born into marble hallways and trust funds. But for now he remained invisible, just another poor kid whose presence was barely acknowledged in a world of wealth and privilege. The evening arrived with the soft chime of the mansion's doorbell. Marcus sat in the kitchen with his homework spread across the small table where the staff took their meals, trying to concentrate on his math problems while the sounds of Victoria's dinner party drifted from the main dining room. Laughter, clinking glasses, and animated business discussions created a soundtrack of a world he'd never be part of. "Marcus, baby, I need to serve the dessert course," Sarah whispered, adjusting her uniform. "Just stay here and keep quiet, okay? They'll be done soon." Through the kitchen's service window, Marcus could see into the dining room where Victoria entertained her guests. Most were middle-aged business executives, their expensive suits and confident postures marking them as people accustomed to power. One man in particular caught Marcus's attention, a tall, silver-haired gentleman who seemed to command even Victoria's respect. James Patterson, Victoria's longtime business partner and majority shareholder in Sterling Technologies, leaned back in his chair with the satisfaction of a man who just closed another $1 million deal. "Victoria, you've outdone yourself tonight. The presentation was flawless, and that contract with the Singapore firm will triple our Asian market share." Victoria smiled, basking in the praise. At 50, she'd built her father's small tech company into a global empire, and moments like these reminded her why she'd sacrificed so much for success. "It's all about understanding what people need before they know they need it, James." "Speaking of understanding people," James said, swirling his brandy, "I've been thinking about your father's old philosophy. He always said the best way to judge someone's character was through chess. Said it revealed more about a person than any interview or reference check." Victoria's eyes lit up. "He used to make me play every Sunday after church. Said chess was the great equalizer, that intelligence and strategy mattered more than anything else." "Do you still play?" asked another guest, a woman from the venture capital firm. "Occasionally, but I rarely find worthy opponents anymore," Victoria replied with practiced modesty. The truth was, she'd been quite good in her youth, even winning her university's chess tournament twice. James chuckled. "Well, if you're looking for entertainment, I noticed that young boy in the kitchen earlier. What's his story?" "Oh, that's Sarah's son. She brings him sometimes when she can't find other arrangements." Victoria glanced toward the kitchen dismissively. "Sweet child, I suppose, but you know how it is with these families. Education isn't exactly their priority." The casual racism in her tone made Marcus's stomach tighten. He'd heard variations of this conversation countless times, wealthy people discussing poor families like they were a different species, incapable of intelligence or ambition. "You know what would be amusing?" James said, his voice taking on a mischievous tone. "Why don't you invite the boy to play a quick game? It might be entertaining to see how someone like that approaches chess. Could be a fascinating social experiment." The other guests murmured their agreement, intrigued by the novelty of the idea. Victoria felt a spark of interest. It had been months since she'd played, and the idea of demonstrating her skills while providing entertainment for her guests appealed to her ego. "Sarah," Victoria called toward the kitchen, "could you ask your son to join us for a moment?" Marcus felt his heart sink as his mother appeared beside him, her face apologetic but resigned. "Mrs. Sterling wants to see you, baby. Remember your manners." Walking into the dining room felt like entering a lion's den. 8 pairs of eyes studied Marcus as he stood beside Victoria's chair, his hands clasped behind his back. The chandelier above cast dancing shadows across the faces of people who controlled more wealth than his entire neighborhood combined. "Marcus, isn't it?" Victoria's voice carried the patronizing sweetness adults often used with children they considered beneath them. "My friend Mr. Patterson here was telling us about chess, and I thought it might be fun for you to learn. Would you like to play a little game with me? It'll be educational." The assumption that he needed to learn chess stunned, but Marcus had learned to swallow his pride in situations like this. "If you'd like, ma'am." "Wonderful," Victoria clapped her hands together. "James, this should be quite amusing. The poor dear probably doesn't even know how the pieces move." As the guest relocated to the sitting room and Victoria retrieved her father's precious chess set, Marcus caught his mother's worried expression from the kitchen doorway. Sarah knew her son's secret, knew exactly what was about to happen, but she also knew that speaking up would only make things worse for both of them. Victoria arranged the pieces with ceremonial precision, her guests gathering around like spectators at a gladiator match. "Now, Marcus, don't be nervous. This is just for fun. I'll go easy on you." Marcus took his seat across from the billionaire, his small hands resting lightly on his knees. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was about to play chess with someone who thought she was doing him a favor, someone who had no idea she was facing an opponent who'd been dreaming of this moment his entire life. "Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria announced to her audience. "Let the education begin." Victoria Sterling had always believed that chess revealed character, just as her father had taught her. As she positioned the ornate pieces on the board, she felt confident in what this game would reveal about the quiet boy sitting across from her. She expected hesitation, perhaps a few random moves, certainly nothing that would challenge her decades of experience. "Now, Marcus," she said, settling into her chair with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to winning. "The white pieces always move first. That's you. Just remember, this is supposed to be fun." The guests had arranged themselves in a semicircle behind Victoria's chair, their wine glasses in hand, ready to be entertained by what they assumed would be a quick, educational demonstration. James Patterson leaned forward with particular interest, his eyes gleaming with the anticipation of watching Victoria showcase her intellectual superiority. Marcus studied the board for a moment, his dark eyes moving across the pieces with an intensity that briefly surprised Victoria. Then, without hesitation, he moved his king's pawn 2 squares forward. "E4, he said quietly. "Very good," Victoria replied with exaggerated enthusiasm, as if praising a toddler for tying his shoes. "You do know the basic moves, how wonderful." She responded with her own king's pawn, matching his opening. "Now, let's see what you do next." Marcus didn't hesitate. His hand moved to his king's knight, developing it to F3 in the classic King's India attack formation. The move was precise, purposeful, and executed without the fumbling uncertainty Victoria had expected. "Interesting choice," James murmured, though his tone still carried the patronizing amusement of an adult watching a child play dress-up. "The boy seems to have some basic knowledge of her audience." Victoria nodded, though a small frown creased her brow. She'd expected random, hesitant moves, not the beginning of a coherent opening system. Still, knowing a few opening moves didn't make someone a chess player. She developed her own knight, maintaining her confident demeanor for her audience. What happened next made Victoria's smile falter slightly. Marcus continued developing his pieces with the fluid precision of someone who'd played this opening hundreds of times. Knight to F3, bishop to E2, castling kingside, each move building toward a coherent strategic plan that was decidedly not beginner's luck. My, said the woman from the venture capital firm. "He seems to know what he's doing." "Oh, children today," Victoria replied with a forced laugh, though her voice carried less certainty than before. "They probably teach basic chess in schools now, public education and all that." She moved her bishop, but her casual confidence was beginning to crack. Marcus's response was swift and devastating. He advanced his H-pawn, preparing a kingside attack that made Victoria's position suddenly uncomfortable. The move demonstrated not just knowledge of basic principles, but a deep understanding of dynamic chess strategy. James Patterson set down his wineglass, his expression shifting from amused condescension to genuine puzzlement. "That's actually quite a sophisticated plan he's developing." Victoria felt heat rising in her cheeks. This wasn't going according to script. The boy was supposed to move pieces randomly, maybe capture a pawn or two before succumbing to her superior experience. Instead, she found herself facing the kind of systematic pressure she hadn't encountered since her university days. "Lucky moves," she muttered, though she was no longer speaking to her guests. Her full attention was now on the board, where Marcus's pieces were coordinating with the harmony of a well-rehearsed orchestra. Marcus remained silent, his expression calm and focused. He'd learned long ago not to show emotion during games, especially when playing people who underestimated him. Every move he made was calculated, building toward the kind of crushing attack that had made him the unofficial champion of the downtown community center. When Marcus sacrificed a pawn to open lines against Victoria's king, the room fell completely silent. Even the casual observers could sense that something extraordinary was happening. This wasn't a child making random moves. This was a chess player executing a master-level plan. "What exactly is he doing?" Victoria asked, more to herself than to her guests. For the first time in the game, she took more than a few seconds to consider her response. "I believe Victoria," James said slowly, his voice now devoid of its earlier amusement. "He's winning." Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she moved her king to safety, but Marcus's next move made it clear that safety was an illusion. His rook lifted to the edge for her, joining the attack with devastating effect. The combination was beautiful in its simplicity and terrible in its inevitability. "This is impossible," Victoria whispered, staring at the board as if the pieces might rearrange themselves into a more favorable position. "He's just a child. He's just—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence that had been on her lips. The racist assumption that had seemed so obvious minutes earlier now felt absurd in the face of the artistic destruction taking place on her father's chessboard. Marcus moved his queen to h5, and suddenly Victoria could see the end of the game stretching before her like a road to humiliation. Every defensive resource she tried to muster was met with another precise blow, each move revealing deeper layers of tactical brilliance. The boy she'd invited to play for fun wasn't just beating her position with the cold precision of a grandmaster. Victoria Sterling's world was collapsing 64 squares at a time. The chessboard that had seemed like a stage for her intellectual superiority now felt like a courtroom where she was being tried and found wanting. Across from her, Marcus Williams sat with the same quiet composure he'd maintained since the game began, his dark eyes calculating variations that Victoria couldn't even see. "Your move, Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said softly, his voice carrying no triumph, no mockery, just the patient tone of someone accustomed to waiting for opponents to realize their predicament. Victoria stared at the board, her face flushed with embarrassment and growing anger. Every piece she'd moved with such confidence was now under attack or defending desperately against Marcus's relentless assault. Her king cowered behind a wall of pawns that felt more like a prison than protection. "This is extraordinary," breathed the venture capital executive, leaning closer to study the position. "The boy's completely outplaying her." James Patterson's expression had shifted from amused entertainment to something approaching shock. "Victoria, how is this possible? Where did this child learn to play like this?" "He didn't," Victoria snapped, her composure finally cracking. "This has to be some kind of fluke. Children don't play chess like this." She gestured angrily at the board. "Maybe he's memorized some computer games or something." From the kitchen doorway, Sarah Williams watched her son with a mixture of pride and terror. She'd known this moment would come eventually. Marcus was too talented to remain hidden forever, but she'd hoped it would happen somewhere safer, somewhere the consequences wouldn't affect her job and their livelihood. Marcus ignored the growing tension around him, focused entirely on the position. When Victoria finally made her move, a desperate attempt to trade queens and simplify the position, he shook his head almost imperceptibly and played a move that made the entire room gasp. "He declined the trade," James whispered. "He's keeping the queens on to finish the attack." "That's impossible," Victoria said, her voice rising. "A child wouldn't know to do that. Someone must be helping him." She looked around wildly as if expecting to find a hidden grandmaster whispering advice to Marcus. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, "no one is helping me. Would you like me to explain the continuation?" The offer was made with such genuine politeness that it somehow made Victoria's humiliation worse. This boy, this child of her housekeeper, was offering to teach her chess like she was the beginner. "Explain what?" Victoria demanded. Marcus pointed to the board with clinical precision. "After your king moves to f8, which is the only move I play q8 check, your king goes to e7, then q8 is checkmate. If you try q8 instead, then q7 leads to mate in 3 moves. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria stared at the board, trying to find a flaw in Marcus's analysis, but the variations played out in her mind exactly as he'd described. Every escape route was covered. Every defense was insufficient. "You're certain of this?" James asked Marcus, his voice now carrying genuine respect rather than condescension. "Yes, sir. Chess is like mathematics. The answers don't change based on who's asking the question." The quiet wisdom in Marcus's response hit Victoria like a physical blow. Here was a 13-year-old boy, dressed in discount store clothes, delivering profound truths about merit and ability that she'd spent her entire life refusing to acknowledge. "This is ridiculous," she said, standing abruptly and causing several pieces to tremble on the board. "There has to be an explanation. Children like him don't just... Children like him don't what, Victoria?" The question came from Dr. Elizabeth Chen, one of Victoria's dinner guests and a psychology professor at Stanford. "Don't possess intelligence. Don't have the capacity for strategic thinking? Victoria's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. The racist implications of her protests were becoming impossible to deny, even to herself. Marcus remained seated, his hands folded in his lap, waiting patiently for Victoria to either resign or play out the hopeless position. He'd been in situations like this before, moments when his talent forced people to confront their assumptions about what intelligence looked like. "I need another game," Victoria said suddenly, her voice desperate. "One game doesn't prove anything. Beginner's luck happens all the time." "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said gently, "I don't think my mother would want me to take up more of your evening. Your guests probably have other things they'd like to do." The boy's consideration for others, even in his moment of triumph, only highlighted Victoria's gracelessness. Here was someone who'd just delivered a chess masterpiece being more concerned about inconveniencing others than celebrating his victory. Victoria said firmly, "I insist, one more game, reset the board." As Marcus quietly began arranging the pieces for a second game, Sarah Williams felt her heart breaking. She knew her son was about to humiliate Victoria Sterling again, and she feared what that might mean for their future. In her experience, powerful people didn't forgive being shown up by those they considered beneath them. But Marcus was already studying the fresh position, his mind calculating new possibilities, preparing to prove once again that genius recognizes no boundaries of race, class, or circumstance. The real game was just beginning. The reset chessboard gleamed under the chandelier's light like a battlefield prepared for war. Victoria Sterling's hands shook slightly as she arranged the white pieces, her earlier confidence replaced by grim determination. She would not be humiliated twice by a child, especially not in front of her most important business associates. This time, she announced to her audience, "I'll take this seriously from the first move." Marcus nodded respectfully, though his expression remained unchanged. He'd seen this reaction before, adults who couldn't accept that a young black boy could outthink them, who needed to believe their first loss was a fluke. It never ended well for them. James Patterson refilled his brandy, settling in for what he hoped would be a more competitive game. Perhaps the first match was just beginner's luck, he mused, though his tone suggested he no longer believed it. Victoria opened with d4, the queen's pawn game, a more classical positional choice than her previous game. She was determined to avoid the tactical complications where Marcus had destroyed her before. This time she would rely on experience and patience. Marcus responded with nf6, the simple knight development that could transpose into numerous defensive systems. But as the game progressed, it became clear that he wasn't just playing defense. He was laying the groundwork for something far more sophisticated. By the 10th move, Victoria's advantage as white had evaporated entirely. Marcus's pieces danced across the board with geometric precision, each move serving multiple purposes. His bishop on g7 controlled the long diagonal, his knights found perfect squares, and his rooks connected seamlessly along the back rank. How was he doing this? Victoria muttered, more to himself than to her audience. Every plan she conceived was anticipated and countered before she could implement it. Dr. Chen leaned forward, studying not just the board but Marcus's demeanor. "Notice how he calculates," she whispered to the other guests. "No wasted motion, no second guessing. That's not luck. That's pattern recognition at the highest level." Victoria tried to create complications in the center, sacrificing a pawn to open lines for her pieces. For a moment she felt hopeful. Surely this kind of dynamic position would confuse a child, even a talented one. Marcus spent less than 30 seconds analyzing the position before unleashing a combination that left the entire room speechless. He sacrificed his own pawn, then his knight, creating a devastating attack that exposed Victoria's king to overwhelming force. "That's impossible," James breathed, staring at the board. "That sequence, it's like something you'd see in a master game." Victoria's face had gone pale. She could see the checkmate coming, inevitable as sunrise, but couldn't bring herself to resign. To acknowledge defeat would be to admit everything she'd believed about intelligence, about class, about race, was fundamentally wrong. "I has to be cheating somehow," she said desperately. "No one plays chess like this at 13. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, "would you like me to play blindfolded? I can call out my moves without looking at the board." The offer was made with such gentle sincerity that it somehow made Victoria's accusation seem even more desperate. Here was a child offering to handicap himself to prove his legitimacy, while she grasped for excuses to explain her humiliation. "Play blindfolded?" James asked incredulously. "You can see the entire position in your mind." Marcus nodded. "It's like reading a book. Once you understand the language, you don't need to sound out every word." The metaphor was elegant and devastating. Victoria realized she was the one who couldn't read, at least not the language of recognizing talent in unexpected places. With tears of frustration building in her eyes, Victoria played her next move, knowing it was hopeless. Marcus responded instantly, his voice calm and clear, as he announced checkmate in 3 moves. "QFC forces the king to h8, he explained patiently. "Then Q8 plus drives it to h7, and Q8 is mate." Victoria stared at the board, seeing the brutal logic of the combination. Her king would be driven into the corner like a trapped animal, with no escape and no defenders. "I resign," she whispered, tipping over her king with a trembling hand. The silence that followed was profound. 8 of the most successful people in Silicon Valley sat in stunned quiet, processing what they'd witnessed. A 13-year-old boy had just given a chess exhibition that would have impressed Grandmaster. "Marcus," Dr. Chen said softly, "where did you learn to play like this?" "The community center, mostly," Marcus replied. "Mr. Johnson taught me the basics when I was 7, and I've been playing there ever since." "How often do you play?" "Every day after school, and weekends when my mom doesn't need me here." Victoria felt the weight of this revelation. While she'd been dismissing him as just another poor kid, Marcus had been dedicating himself to chess with the passion of a true artist. He'd developed his genius in a community center, not because of privilege but despite its absence. James Patterson stood slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Young man, do you realize what you've just done? You've beaten one of the finest chess players I know, and you've done it twice, convincingly." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Mrs. Sterling played well. Chess is it's what I love to do." The simple honesty of his response highlighted the vast gulf between his character and Victoria's. While she'd used chess as a tool for demonstrating superiority, he played for the pure love of the game. Victoria rose from her chair, her legs unsteady. She looked at Marcus. "Really, look at him." Child of her housekeeper, but a young man whose mind operated on a level she was only beginning to comprehend. "I need some air," she announced, walking toward the terrace doors. Behind her, her guests began peppering Marcus with questions about his chess background, their voices filled with the wonder and respect she should have shown from the beginning. As Victoria stood alone on her terrace, overlooking the manicured grounds of her estate, she realized that the most expensive lesson of her life had just been delivered by a boy she'd thought wasn't worth noticing. The question now was whether she had the courage to learn from it. Victoria Sterling couldn't sleep. For 3 days since the chess game, she'd replayed every move, every moment, trying to understand what had happened in her dining room. The boy's face haunted her, not with anger or triumph, but with the quiet dignity of someone accustomed to being underestimated. At 6 a.m. on Tuesday morning, she sat in her home office with her laptop open, typing search terms she'd never imagined she'd need. Child chess prodigies, youngest chess master, African-American chess players. The results overwhelmed her. Story after story of young players achieving incredible ratings, winning tournaments, earning scholarships, and many of them looked like Marcus. Her coffee grew cold as she read about Tanatolu Wa Deumi, the Nigerian refugee who'd become a chess champion while living in a homeless shelter. About Justice Williams, who'd become the youngest African-American chess master at 12. About countless other young players whose talent had nothing to do with their circumstances and everything to do with their dedication. "How did I not know about any of this?" she whispered to her empty office. Victoria's phone buzzed with messages from her dinner guests, all asking about that remarkable boy. Dr. Chen had sent 3 emails requesting Marcus's contact information, wanting to study his cognitive abilities. James Patterson had called twice, suggesting they should sponsor the child's chess education. But Victoria found herself afraid to face Marcus again. The memory of her condescending tone, her racist assumptions, her desperate excuses, it all felt like a spotlight illuminating the worst parts of her character. By Thursday, her curiosity and guilt had grown unbearable. She told her assistant she'd be out for the afternoon and drove to the downtown community center, a building she'd passed hundreds of times but never entered. The neighborhood was nothing like her estate. Chain-link fences, modest homes, working-class businesses serving working-class families. The community center was a converted warehouse with worn linoleum floors and fluorescent lighting. Following the sound of voices, Victoria found herself at the entrance to a large room where dozens of chessboards were set up, players of all ages engaged in intense concentration. "Can I help you?" The voice belonged to a middle-aged Latino woman with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers. "I'm Elena Rodriguez. I coordinate the chess program here." Victoria felt suddenly self-conscious in her designer clothes and jewelry. I'm looking for information about one of your players, Marcus Williams." Elena's face lit up immediately. "Marcus? You from one of the schools? We've been hoping someone would notice his talent. Actually, Victoria paused, unsure how to explain. "I played chess with him recently. I wanted to understand more about his background." "You played Marcus?" Elena's eyebrows rose. "How did that go for you?" Victoria's cheeks burned. "Not well." Elena laughed not unkindly. "Don't feel bad. He beats everyone here, and some of these folks have been playing for decades. Come on, let me show you something." She led Victoria to a bulletin board covered with tournament results, newspaper clippings, and photographs. In the center was a chart showing player ratings, and at the top, far above everyone else, was Marcus Williams, 2150. "That rating," Elena explained, "puts him in the top 1% of all chess players in the country. For his age, it's almost unheard of." "How long has he been playing at this level?" "He started here when he was 7, Elena said, her voice warm with pride. "Shy little boy, came with his mother while she worked weekend jobs in the neighborhood. Mr. Johnson? He's our head instructor, taught Marcus the basics, but honestly, within 6 months Marcus was teaching us." Victoria began to see the center not as a run-down building in a rough neighborhood, but as a sanctuary where intelligence was nurtured regardless of economic status. "Has anyone offered to help him?" Victoria asked. "Scholarships, coaching, that sort of thing." Elena's expression grew sad. "We've tried. There are programs for gifted chess players, but most require travel to tournaments, private coaching, fees we can't afford. Marcus's mother works 3 jobs just to keep them afloat. Every spare dollar goes to basic necessities. But surely someone with his talent should have opportunities," Elena finished. "You're absolutely right, but the chess world, like most worlds, tends to notice the children who already have advantages. A poor black kid from this neighborhood, he has to be twice as good to get half the attention." Victoria felt each word like a physical blow. She thought about her own childhood, private tutors, expensive chess sets, unlimited time to pursue her interests because money was never a concern. "There he is now," Elena said softly. Victoria turned to see Marcus entering the room with his mother, both still in work clothes from Sarah's afternoon cleaning job. Marcus spotted Victoria immediately, his expression shifting to polite wariness. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, approaching carefully. "Is everything okay? Is my mom in trouble?" The question broke Victoria's heart. This brilliant child's first concern wasn't why a billionaire had come to his chess club. It was whether his mother's job was secure. Marcus," Victoria said gently. "Your mother isn't in trouble. I came because I wanted to apologize." Marcus tilted his head, confused. "Apologize for what?" "For not seeing you," Victoria replied. "For assuming I knew what intelligence looked like. For treating you like you were invisible." Sarah Williams stepped forward protectively. "Mrs. Sterling, Marcus doesn't need—" "Actually," Victoria interrupted, "I think I'm the one who needs something. I need to understand how I could be so blind to such extraordinary talent right in front of me." Elena watched the exchange with growing interest. She'd seen plenty of people discover Marcus's ability, but never someone who seemed genuinely shaken by their own prejudices. "Marcus," Victoria continued, "would you be willing to show me around? Help me understand what this place means to you." Marcus looked to his mother, who nodded slowly. As he began explaining the different programs, the tournaments they couldn't afford to attend, the Grandmaster games he studied on borrowed chess books, Victoria realized she wasn't just learning about chess. She was learning about a world she'd never bothered to see, full of talent and dreams that society had decided weren't worth investing in. By the time she left the community center 2 hours later, Victoria Sterling had more questions than answers. But for the first time in years, she was asking the right question. Victoria returned to the community center the next afternoon, this time bringing her laptop and a notebook. She'd spent the night researching chess rankings, tournament structures, and scholarship programs, trying to understand the barriers Marcus faced. What she discovered horrified her. Elena Rodriguez was setting up boards for the evening session when Victoria arrived. Back again? Marcus will be here soon. He comes every day after school. Actually, I was hoping to talk with you first, Victoria said. I've been doing research and I have questions. They sat in Elena's small office, surrounded by chess books, tournament flyers, and photographs of young players. Elena poured coffee from a thermos and settled back in her chair. What did you find? Elena asked. Victoria opened her laptop, showing Elena the spreadsheets she'd created. According to the U.S. Chess Federation database, Marcus's rating of 2150 puts him in the 99th percentile nationally. For a 13-year-old, it's extraordinary. We know, Elena said quietly. What else? There are only 12 African-American chess masters under age 16 in the entire country. Marcus is on track to be the 13th, possibly the youngest ever. Victoria's voice grew frustrated. So why isn't anyone helping him? Elena's laugh was bitter. You want the honest answer? Because the chess world is like every other elite world. It rewards people who already have advantages. Tournament entry fees, travel costs, private coaching. It all adds up to thousands of dollars per year. Victoria scrolled through more data. I found a tournament in Chicago next month. First prize is a full scholarship to a chess academy in New York. Marcus's rating qualifies him for entry. The entry fee is $500, 0 cents plus travel and hotel costs, Elena replied. Sarah makes $500, 0 cents in 2 weeks of cleaning houses. That tournament might as well be on Mars. The casual mention of Sarah's wages hit Victoria like a slap. She spent more than $500, 0 cents, on a single dinner at her favorite restaurant. The idea that such a small amount of money could be an insurmountable barrier to genius seemed obscene. What about local sponsors, businesses that might help? Elena gestured around the modest office. This is a working-class neighborhood. The local businesses are barely surviving themselves. We've applied for grants, reached out to chess organizations, even tried crowdfunding. Most people don't understand what they're looking at when they see Marcus play. Victoria thought about her dinner party guests, their shocked expressions as Marcus demolished her position. Even highly educated, successful people had struggled to believe what they were witnessing. Has he had professional coaching? Mr. Johnson taught him the basics, but he's not a professional coach. Marcus mostly learns from books he borrows from the library and free videos online. Everything else he figures out himself. The revelation stunned Victoria. Marcus had reached master-level strength, essentially self-taught, working with resources most serious players would consider inadequate. Elena, Victoria said slowly, what would it take to give Marcus every advantage? The best coaching, tournament play, proper preparation. Honestly, about $15,000, 0 cents per year. Private coaching runs $100, 0 cents per hour, and a serious player needs at least 2 hours per week. Tournament travel, entry fees, chess books and software, maybe a chess camp in the summer? Elena paused. For most of our families, that's impossible. Victoria did quick math in her head. $15,000, 0 cents, was less than she spent on clothes in a typical month. The disparity was so vast it felt surreal. Has anyone from the chess establishment reached out? Tournament directors, federation officials? Elena's expression darkened. A few scouts have seen him play at local events. They're always impressed, but when they learn his background, she shrugged. It's easier to invest in a kid whose parents can write checks. That's discrimination. That's reality. The chess world likes to think of itself as a pure meritocracy, but merit alone isn't enough if you can't afford to compete. Marcus arrived then, backpack slung over his shoulder, greeting other players as he made his way to his usual board. Victoria watched him set up pieces with the same careful precision she'd seen at her mansion, but here he seemed more relaxed, more himself. "Marcus," Elena called, "Mrs. Sterling has some questions about your chess development." Marcus approached warily, still unsure why this wealthy woman was taking such interest in his life. Victoria noticed his clothes were clean but worn, his shoes carefully maintained but showing their age. "Marcus, Elena was telling me about tournaments you can't afford to enter. Is that frustrating?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I try not to think about it too much. I can still study, still improve my game. There's always something to learn." A mature perspective from a 13-year-old impressed Victoria. "But you'd like to compete against stronger players, of course. You can only improve so much playing the same people every day." Marcus gestured around the room. "Everyone here is nice, but after a while you know how they think, how they play. I'd love to test myself against different styles." Victoria felt something click into place. Marcus wasn't just talented. He was hungry for challenges that his circumstances denied him. He possessed the drive that separated good players from great ones, but lacked the resources to develop it. "What's your dream, Marcus? If you could do anything with chess?" Marcus's eyes lit up with a passion Victoria had never seen in him before. "I want to become a grandmaster. I want to represent the United States in international competition. I want to show other kids like me that it's possible." The last part of his answer hit Victoria hardest. Marcus wasn't just dreaming of personal success. He wanted to inspire others who faced the same barriers he did. "Everything in chess costs money I don't have." Victoria looked around the community center, seeing it now through completely different eyes. This wasn't just a recreation program. It was a place where dreams were nurtured against impossible odds, where talent bloomed without resources, where kids like Marcus learned that their potential mattered even when the world suggested otherwise. She thought about her father's chess set, sitting unused in her study, worth more than most families' annual income. She thought about the opportunities she'd taken for granted, the advantages she'd never questioned. For the first time in her life, Victoria Sterling understood the difference between deserving success and having access to it. Victoria Sterling sat in her car outside the community center for 20 minutes after leaving, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she processed everything she'd learned. The weight of her revelation pressed down on her like physical force. She had encountered genuine genius and nearly dismissed it because it didn't come packaged in the way she expected. When she finally drove home, the mansion felt different. The marble floors seemed colder, the expensive artwork more ostentatious. She walked to her father's study and stared at the chess set that had started this entire journey. The ivory and ebony pieces that had once represented intellectual sophistication now felt like symbols of privilege and waste. Her phone buzzed with a text from James Patterson. "Victoria, I can't stop thinking about that boy's games. Have you considered what we might do to help him?" She set the phone aside without responding. What they might do. The phrase irritated her because it reduced Marcus to a charity case rather than recognizing him as a young person whose talent demanded respect and opportunity. Saturday morning arrived with Sarah Williams' usual quiet efficiency. Victoria found herself watching her housekeeper with new eyes, seeing not just an employee but a mother who worked multiple jobs to support her extraordinary son. When Sarah knocked gently on the study door, Victoria felt a surge of something she rarely experienced: shame. "Mrs. Sterling, I have Marcus with me today. I hope that's still acceptable?" Of course, Sarah. Actually, Victoria paused, struggling with words. Could I speak with both of you for a moment? Sarah's expression immediately turned wary. In her experience, wealthy employers who wanted to speak usually meant trouble. Marcus appeared behind his mother, polite but guarded. Victoria gestured toward the sitting area, away from the imposing desk that usually dominated her interactions with staff. I owe you both an apology, Victoria began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Not just for the other night, but for years of not seeing what was right in front of me. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Sterling, you don't need to— Yes, I do. Victoria's voice grew stronger. Marcus, I've spent the last week learning about your chess ability, about what you've accomplished with no help from anyone. I was ignorant and dismissive, and I'm sorry. Marcus studied her face, trying to gauge her sincerity. Thank you for saying that. But I want to do more than apologize. I want to understand. How do you manage it? Working multiple jobs, raising a son with this kind of talent, dealing with people like me who can't see past their own assumptions? Sarah's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing the exhaustion beneath. You do what you have to do. Marcus deserves every opportunity I can give him, even if it's not much. 3 jobs, Victoria said quietly. Elena told me you work 3 jobs, sometimes 4 depending on the season. Sarah's chin lifted with quiet pride. I clean offices downtown on weekdays, houses on weekends, and I work nights at a restaurant when they need help. Marcus comes with me when I can't arrange other care. Victoria felt physically ill imagining Marcus doing homework in restaurant kitchens and office break rooms while his mother cleaned to support his dreams. The tournament in Chicago, Victoria said. Elena mentioned you can't afford the entry fee. Marcus's face lit up despite his attempts to remain neutral. You know about that tournament? I researched it. The winner gets a full scholarship to a chess academy. Victoria paused. Marcus, what would that mean to you? Everything, he answered without hesitation. That academy has produced 6 grandmasters in the last 10 years. The coaching, the training partners, the tournament experience. It would change my entire future. Victoria looked at Sarah, seeing the pain in her eyes. Here was a mother who knew exactly what her son needed but couldn't provide it, despite working herself to exhaustion. The total cost for Chicago would be about $1,200, 0 cents, Victoria said. Travel, hotel, meals, entry fee. That's 2 months of groceries, Sarah replied quietly. I've been trying to save, but every time I get close, something comes up. Car repair, medical bills, school expenses. Victoria stood abruptly and walked to her father's desk, pulling out her checkbook. Both Marcus and Sarah watched nervously as she wrote, then tore off the check and returned to them. This covers Chicago and the next 5 tournaments, she said, holding out the check. Sarah stared at the amount. $6,000, 0 cents, more money than she usually saw at once. Mrs. Sterling, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not charity, Victoria replied firmly. It's an investment in talent that our society has been too blind to recognize. Marcus, you have a gift that deserves to be developed properly. Marcus looked between the check and Victoria's face. Why are you doing this? The question forced Victoria to confront her own motivations. Was this guilt? Genuine desire to help? An attempt to assuage her conscience? Because, she said finally, I've spent my entire life believing that success comes to those who deserve it, and have the opportunity to pursue it. You deserve it, Marcus. You've always deserved it. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the check. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help more, Victoria replied. That tournament is just the beginning. Marcus needs regular coaching, better training partners, exposure to master-level competition. If he's going to become a grandmaster, he needs everything that money can provide. Marcus spoke up, his voice serious beyond his years. What do you want in return? The question surprised Victoria. Nothing. What could I possibly want from you? In my experience, when wealthy people help poor people, they usually want something back. Maybe not right away, but eventually. The cynicism in a 13-year-old's voice broke Victoria's heart. How many times had Marcus been disappointed by adults who offered help with hidden agendas? I want to learn from you, Victoria said honestly. I want to understand how someone develops this kind of talent against such odds. I want to figure out how many other kids like you are being overlooked because people like me can't see past our own prejudices. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but I want to earn this opportunity. I'll work harder than anyone, prove that your investment was worth it. Marcus, Victoria said gently, you don't need to prove anything to me. You already have. As Sarah carefully folded the check and put it in her purse, Victoria realized this was just the beginning. She'd opened a door to a world she'd never seen, and now she had a responsibility to do more than just write checks. She had to use her privilege to dismantle the barriers that kept talent hidden in places she'd never bothered to look. 2 weeks later, Victoria's dining room had been transformed into a tournament-quality chess venue. She'd hired a professional arbiter, installed proper lighting, and even brought in the same digital clocks used in grandmaster competitions. James Patterson sat across from her, watching preparations with fascination. I still can't believe you're doing this, James said, adjusting his position in the spectator chair. You called and said you wanted to arrange a formal match with the boy. I thought you'd lost your mind. Victoria finished positioning the last pieces on the board, not her father's ornate set, but regulation tournament pieces that wouldn't distract from the game itself. I lost something, but it wasn't my mind. It was my arrogance. And you think playing him again will accomplish what, exactly? Nothing, Victoria replied honestly. This isn't about me winning or proving anything. This is about giving Marcus a proper game with a serious opponent, with witnesses who understand what they're seeing. Elena Rodriguez arrived with Marcus and Sarah, carrying a folder full of score sheets and a small digital camera. This is quite a setup, she said, admiring the professional atmosphere Victoria had created. Marcus wore his best clothes, still modest but clean and pressed with obvious care. He seemed more relaxed than during their previous encounters, though Victoria noticed his hands shaking slightly as he sat down across from her. Nervous? She asked gently. A little, Marcus admitted. This feels more official than usual. It is official, Elena said, consulting her papers. Mrs. Sterling requested that this game be rated by the U.S. Chess Federation. Win or lose, it'll count toward your official rating. Victoria saw Marcus's eyes widen with understanding. A rated game against an opponent of her caliber could boost his rating significantly, opening doors to higher-level tournaments and recognition. The time control is 90 minutes for each player, the arbiter announced, with a 30-second increment per move. Standard FIDE rules apply. James leaned forward as Victoria shook Marcus's hand across the board. This time there would be no condescension, no casual dismissal of her opponent's ability. She'd spent 2 weeks studying his previous games, trying to understand his style and preparation. Good luck, Marcus said sincerely. Thank you, Victoria replied. I have a feeling I'll need it. The game began with Marcus playing the white pieces, opening with his characteristic 1e4. Victoria responded with the Sicilian defense, choosing a sharp tactical line that would test both players' calculating ability. From the first few moves, the difference between this game and their previous encounters was obvious. Victoria played with focused intensity, considering each move carefully, showing Marcus the respect she should have given him from the beginning. Marcus reciprocated with his finest chess. Each move was precisely calculated, building toward the kind of strategic masterpiece that separated masters from amateurs. By move 15, both players were deep in thought, the position reaching a complexity that impressed even Elena. This is extraordinary, James whispered to Elena. The level of play from both sides. I've seen professional games with less sophistication. Elena nodded, her eyes glued to the board. Marcus is playing the best chess of his life. Having a strong opponent who respects his ability is bringing out everything he's learned. The critical moment came on move 23. Marcus had built up tremendous pressure against Victoria's kingside, but she'd found a defensive resource that seemed to neutralize his attack. For 10 minutes, Marcus sat motionless, calculating variations that stretched 15 moves deep. Victoria used the time to study her opponent's face. Gone was the quiet, invisible boy she'd first met. This was a chess player in his element, a mind operating at maximum capacity, completely absorbed in the artistic and logical beauty of the position. When Marcus finally moved, sacrificing his bishop for 2 pawns and a devastating initiative, Victoria knew the game was effectively over. The combination was brilliant not just for its tactical accuracy, but for its long-term strategic vision. "Incredible," she murmured, seeing how Marcus's pieces would coordinate for a final assault on her king. The endgame was a masterpiece of technique. Marcus converted his advantage with the precision of a surgeon, never allowing Victoria even a glimmer of counterplay. When he announced checkmate 15 moves later, the room erupted in spontaneous applause. "That," James said, standing to shake Marcus's hand, "was one of the finest games of chess I've ever witnessed. Young man, you just beat a very strong player in convincing style." Victoria rose slowly, extending her hand to Marcus with genuine admiration. "Congratulations, that was beautiful chess." "Thank you for the game," Marcus replied, his voice warm with respect. "You played much stronger than before. It forced me to find my best moves." The mutual respect between them was obvious to everyone in the room. This hadn't been about proving superiority or settling scores. It had been about 2 chess players testing themselves against worthy opposition. Lelena was already uploading the game notation to the Chess Federation's database. "This result will boost your rating by at least 40 points, she told Marcus. "You're now officially one of the strongest 13-year-olds in the country." As the evening wound down and the spectators discussed the game's most brilliant moments, Victoria found herself alone with Marcus for a moment. "How does it feel," she asked, "having your talent finally recognized?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Good, but also strange. For so long I thought I had to hide how much I loved chess, how good I was getting. I was afraid people would think I was showing off or getting above myself. Now I realize that hiding talent doesn't protect anyone. It just wastes something precious." Marcus looked directly at Victoria. "Thank you for helping me understand that." Victoria felt tears building in her eyes. This remarkable young man was thanking her for learning what she should have known all along, that genius deserves recognition regardless of its packaging. "No, Marcus," she said softly. "Thank you for teaching me to see."
3 months after their first encounter, Victoria Sterling stood in the ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel in San Jose, watching Marcus Williams analyze his position against international master David Chin. The California Youth Championship had drawn the strongest young players on the West Coast, and Marcus was holding his own against opponents who'd been receiving professional coaching for years. "He's found the key move," Elena whispered beside her, pointing to the board where Marcus had just unleashed a powerful pawn breakthrough. "David's position is collapsing." Victoria nodded, though her attention was divided between the chess game and the broader scene around her. 3 months of intensive coaching, tournament play, and proper preparation had transformed not just Marcus's results, but his entire presence. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his worth. The transformation extended beyond chess. Victoria had established the Thomas Sterling Chess Foundation in her father's memory, providing scholarships and coaching to talented players from underserved communities. Marcus had become not just the foundation's first beneficiary, but its inspiration. "Mrs. Sterling." Sarah Williams appeared beside her, wearing the professional outfit Victoria had helped her select for her new position as the foundation's community outreach coordinator. "The reporter from Chess Life wants to interview you about the foundation." Victoria glanced toward the journalist, then back at the game. "In a few minutes. I want to see how this finishes." Marcus was indeed winning, his pieces coordinating beautifully as international master Chen's resistance crumbled. When the handshake came 5 moves later, Victoria felt a surge of pride that surprised her with its intensity. "Congratulations," she said as Marcus approached their group, his face glowing with satisfaction. "Thank you. That was my best game of the tournament so far." Marcus looked around the playing hall, filled with dozens of serious young competitors. 6 months ago, I never imagined I'd be playing in tournaments like this." James Patterson, who'd become an unexpected regular at Marcus's tournaments, clapped the boy on the shoulder. "How do you feel about round 6 tomorrow? You're paired against the top seed." Excited, Marcus replied without hesitation. "I've been studying his games. He's strong, but I think I understand his style." Victoria marveled at the confidence in his voice, not arrogance, but the self-assurance of someone who'd worked hard and knew his preparation was thorough. The interview with Chess Life went well, though Victoria found herself deflecting credit toward Marcus, Elena, and the entire community that had nurtured his talent. When the reporter asked about her motivation for starting the foundation, Victoria thought carefully before answering. "I discovered that our society is full of hidden genius," she said. "We've created systems that reward talent only when it comes from certain backgrounds, certain neighborhoods, certain families. The Thomas Sterling Foundation exists to find the chess talent we've been overlooking and give it the support it deserves." Later that evening, Victoria found Marcus in the hotel lobby, studying positions on his laptop while other young players socialized nearby. She sat down across from him, noting how comfortable he seemed in this competitive environment. "Preparing for tomorrow?" she asked. "Always," Marcus replied with a grin. "Elena says grandmasters never stop studying, so I figure I should start building good habits now." Victoria watched him navigate through complex variations with the same intensity she'd seen in their first game. "Marcus, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Do you ever feel angry about the years when no one was helping you? When you had all this talent but no opportunities?" Marcus closed his laptop and considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I think about all the kids who are still in that situation, and I realize I can't change the past. I can only make sure I use the opportunities one have now to help other people get theirs." The maturity in his response reminded Victoria why she'd been drawn to help him. Marcus possessed not just chess talent, but the character to use his success responsibly. "The foundation has identified 12 more young players," Victoria said. "Kids like you who've been developing their talent in community centers and after-school programs, waiting for someone to notice." Marcus's eyes lit up. "When do I get to meet them?" "Next month. We're organizing a training camp where you'll work with our new coaching staff." Victoria paused. "I was hoping you might consider being a mentor to some of the younger ones." "I'd love that. When I was starting out, I wished I had someone who understood what it was like to love chess but not have access to good training." Victoria thought about the boy she'd first met, quiet, invisible, carefully avoiding attention. That version of Marcus seemed like a different person entirely, though she knew the transformation had been there all along, waiting for the right opportunities to emerge. "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said quietly, "I want you to know that this isn't just about chess for me anymore." "What do you mean?" "Before, I thought if I could just become a grandmaster, that would be enough. Now I realize that individual success isn't the point. The point is showing other kids that intelligence and talent exist everywhere, and that everyone deserves the chance to develop their gifts." Victoria felt tears building in her eyes. This remarkable young man had not only exceeded her highest expectations, but had taught her that true success meant lifting others as you climbed. The next morning, Marcus won his game against the top seed in brilliant style, earning his first tournament victory at the master level. As Victoria watched him accept the trophy, she realized that the real victory had nothing to do with chess ratings or tournament results. The real victory was in learning to see talent wherever it existed, in dismantling the barriers that kept genius hidden, and in understanding that the most important game anyone could play was the one that opened doors for others. Marcus Williams had taught her that lesson one move at a time, and now it was her turn to teach it to the world. Dear friend, this story reminds us that brilliance exists in every corner of our society, often hidden behind assumptions we make about intelligence, talent, and worth. Marcus Williams represents countless young people whose potential goes unrecognized because they don't fit our narrow definitions of who deserves opportunities. True wisdom lies not in our ability to showcase our own talents, but in our willingness to recognize and nurture the gifts of others, especially those who've been overlooked or underestimated. When we open our minds and extend our hands to lift others up, we don't just change individual lives, we transform our entire communities. Every child deserves the chance to shine. Every dream deserves the opportunity to flourish. If this story touched your heart and opened your eyes, Please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that challenge us to see the world, and each other, with greater compassion and understanding.